what you call the devil is in the details.
No. They do have a solid, workable plan in place. It could have been any of the 2020 documents that we're working on. What we are asking is that we need to be able to break it down and cost it. And then what that means is that we'll then be able to agree on policy. When you talk about diversification, there's not so much of you say we want to diversify this area or that. The framework for doing that is in the fiscal policy. And what is that? Taxes and tariffs.
And that's where budget comes in?
Oh, no. Then you then look at all the aggregate of what you want to do, and then you determine at the level of which we change our taxes and tariffs, including trade agreements we make with external relations and whatever. And I think that's the real challenge. So rather than the budget and planning to sit down and say, look, we've done ERGP, or we are just monitoring it, there's nothing you're monitoring. We then have to monitor and go back and break it down and have an actual rollout plan, which allows companies, for example, to be able to take 6 months, 1 year, 2-year projections in terms of how they want to skew or take risk. You know, the most important thing is that this dichotomy of looking at government separate from business is actually wrong. Private sector is not an alternative to government. It's a complementary aspect of government. Like the Honorable Minister of Finance spoke about and said that job creation is a function of the private sector. All these policies come in, and that's why I go back to the taxes and tariffs issue. And if you get that right, basically you've brought in the private sector into it. And then issues around monetary policy can then come in terms of how to serve as a complement.
We will have 4-year budgets into the ERGP. Do you think this current one is a good way to
Which current
see things
one?
off? The 2017, it's just been passed.
Well, if you look at the 2017, just an extension of the 2016. If you look at it, basically it's more or less like a recalibration of adjustment in terms of real value. There's really no significant increase in terms of the value of the 2016 budget to 2017. It only adjusted for inflation, as it were. And that tells you something, that demand has fallen. We all know that. So purchasing parity has also adjusted. So what you have is that technically there's no difference between your 2017 and 2016 budget. So we'll see that through. Well, the real question you ask yourself is that if we take the ERGP as an overarching plan, whatever you therefore have in 2017, right, is basically a component of that ERGP. So to produce 2018 should not be a difficulty because there is a framework, as it were. There is a plan. But that goes back to my initial comment that we then need to break it down because businesses need to take a look at that ERGP rollout plan and make decisions. It is those decisions they will make vis-a-vis what will happen in terms of taxes, in terms of tariffs, which are basically more like incentives. Then they are able to then take risk. And that goes back to the other question. Traditionally, we've been able to have, your last speaker was talking about the fact that since April 24th, we've had an uptick in the equities market because the foreign markets are able to come in. That's significant. But here is the question. Over the time, we've been able to have increases in that area because of 2 reasons. One, low yields in advanced economies and high oil prices. If we therefore, with not significant oil prices, but still without no low yield in the markets, and we still have the investment, it's a good thing. But that's not really where it is, because we still have a huge gap. If the Honorable Minister talks about infrastructure, power alone will require about $100 billion. Housing will require about far much more than that in terms of gaps. She talked about rail. Here's the challenge about rail. Rail will not happen in less than 18 months or 24 months. To the real effect, therefore, when we talk about that issue about sterile effect, the minimum requirement period between after a recession should be about 18 months for you to see the impact on unemployment, for you to see the impact on those ones. So this traditional monetarist approach we've taken would have to be tempered with the reality to understand that we still cannot be celebrating hugely, but we must acknowledge that the administration has done taken significant steps to stop the bleeding. Now it's the time for rebuilding.
Do you think we've technically been able to stop the hemorrhage?
Yeah, we have done significant because the structure of the Nigerian economy ties itself closely to, and again, the budget 2017 alludes to the assumptions. Exchange rate. It talks about which is a function of oil price and your production per se, and then basically it just focuses on the fact that the structure of the Nigerian economy is such that if the oil prices, which is the driver, continues to be retained as the driver, which is something the ERGP seeks to try to correct, but which it hasn't fully done, it tries to correct it to say, look, there is so much more to the Nigerian economy than oil. We recognize, however, that we will need oil money to move into that diversification phase.
President Buhari's administration, midterm reports, deadline May 29, 3 Mondays from now. We'll be having that conversation and having the parade and all of that. Give us your outlook, give us your reading of the midterm report.
So let's do the intellectual parade. The intellectual parade is that in the first 1 year we decommission the economy. The second year is we try to recalibrate the economy. So we did one thing, we stopped the bleeding. We've been able to generate new interest in the Nigerian economy, despite the challenge, the few reservations by the IMF, but then also few, with the exception of interest rates, capital flows, and you do know that one of the significant challenges Nigeria had was about 3% of the GDP between 2011 and 2014 was moving out in terms of illicit capital outflows from the economy. That has been stopped. That is significant. And to that extent, we are saying that Nigeria needs a much more progressive plan, which is what I continue to talk about, the rollout, that then shows boldness in terms of those gaps we know we have. It is not perfect, but we're saying 2 years, rather than delve on the past and delve on what had happened even in previous administrations, is to say we now have a basis and some level of relationship between the private sector and the government now to begin a bigger conversation to say, for us right now, the 2018 plan should have been something we are discussing about now, not the 2017 plan. They will sign it, it's just an extension of 2016 as it were. It's the 2018 plan to give confidence in the whole economy and to begin to talk about it. But don't forget one last thing, that whereas we are taking the top end in terms of it, we still have this crowding out effect in terms of money supply. And as such, the ordinary man, the common denominator in an economy, the household, is still in deep challenges in terms of the truth. But if you were to say, how has the government done as to the half year, they are in a position to not have any excuse anymore to build on the economy.
No excuse anymore. The finance minister says this administration has proved that it's a can-do administration. So let's put it in there and put it in inverted commas. You have a great week ahead of you. Olufemi Awoyemi, financial analyst and chief executive officer at ProShare Nigeria. The market is always king, and that's after the break.